Okay, so we are going to continue on. This is part three of our learning section. So today we'll spend most of our time talking about observational learning, and then we'll kind of pick up the rest of it at the end. So when we are talking about observational learning, we are simply looking at this idea that when you watch other people, you can learn from that. Right now you are watching this on YouTube, so you would say that you are doing this through observational learning. When you watch somebody, change a tire in the car, that's observational learning. You are learning based on observing other people and seeing what they are doing. So there is a big player in observational learning, and he goes by the name of Albert Bandura. So Albert Bandura came up with what is known as his social learning theory. And basically, all that is saying is that we watch what other people are doing, and then we model or we mimic that thing or that behavior from others. And so that is a way for us to put those things together. So it's kind of like you observe your surroundings through observation, and then you have like operant conditioning, and the combination of those two things becomes social learning theory. So you have I watch someone do a backflip on YouTube, and so then I go and I try it out. The first few times I fail, and so I maybe watch the video again or try a different technique. And eventually I get there. And that is what Albert Bandura calls the social learning theory. So, what you're going to need to know for Albert Bandura, because the social learning theory, observational learning, all super basic concepts that you're not going to struggle with. So, what do you need to remember from this? You need to remember what is known as the Bobo doll experiment. Bobo doll. The Bobo doll experiment. Okay, now I'm going to spend a few minutes explaining the what happened in the experiment, but you can just go online, hop onto YouTube, and watch a video on the Bobo doll experiment and explains it just as well. So once again, Albert Bandura is studying observational learning, social learning theory. So what he did was he got a bunch of kids. He studied children in this experiment, and what he would do is he would take them into a room. Okay, so he puts them into room A. We'll just call this room A. So in room A, they watch TV. Okay, so they are watching a television. This is the antenna. This is what old TVs look like. Okay. So they would watch TV. Look at this drawing. Oh my gosh, I'm so good at this. Okay. So they would watch TV. Now, specifically, there were two types of groups. You had your um, the experimental group and the control group. And so, group the experimental group watched a very specific video. And the video was of an adult who was attacking the Bobo doll. So this is a Bobo doll. Basically, it looks like a clown, but it's inflatable. The bottom part of the doll it has got like sand in it or something, or it's weighted in some way. So basically, what you can do is you can like knock the doll around, and it'll go like it won't move too far, but it'll like bounce back and forth, and then it will always spring back up. So the child in the experimental group watched the adults attack the Bobo doll. They'd knock it around, they'd hit it with hammers, they'd kick it, they'd throw it, they do all sorts of stuff. So then what they would do is once that was finished, they would take the child and they would bring them into room B. Okay? Now in room B, there was lots of really cool toys for the child to play with. There was like, I don't know, whatever kids really like to play with, but lots of like really interesting and exciting toys. And so the child would get invested and they would start playing with them. And right as they were getting comfortable and right as they were really getting started picking the toy that they wanted to play with, a doctor or a psychologist, someone with a lab coat would come in and say, "Oh, hey, listen, sorry, but these toys are for the good boys and girls, so we're going to take you into this other room. Sorry about that mix-up." So then the children were taken into room C. Now, in room C, there was the Bobo doll. Now, there were other toys as well, but nothing as interesting or as exciting as what was in room B. And so the question was, what would the kids do? Now, if you go on and you watch the video, you'll see the kids go absolutely bananas, and they are like beating the thing around, and they really just kind of mimic what was going on, what the adults did in the video. I will post a link in the description of a video for you to watch, but you could literally just find a ton of videos on it. If you just hop onto YouTube. So that is the Bobo doll experiment, and this is something that we kind of take for granted now. But back in the day, think of violent television. So we know now that violent television, while it doesn't make a person violent, it desensitizes a person to it. It makes them less like um, reactive to what is going on. And so what you have is there was a belief, especially before Bandura came out with a study, that watching violent television was cathartic. That if you were really riled up and you watched a boxing match, that was supposed to be like punching somebody, and that was supposed to relax you and calm you down. And we know a lot through Bandura's research that that's not really what is happening. That oftentimes this is a way for people to learn how to vent those frustrations, and so um, you know, so you would see the kids venting their frustration in a similar manner to what the adult was doing. So that's the Bandura Bobo doll experiment. Make sure that you know that. And like I said, if you hop on YouTube or you follow the link in the description, you will be able to watch the video as well. So, learned helplessness is just mostly just kind of a sad concept, especially as we begin to kind of look at our own lives and try to, apply it to ourselves. So, learned helplessness is this idea that it's a state, it's a mental state where a person has had difficulties in a specific area, and because of those difficulties, they have learned that it's not worth fighting and not worth working through it, and so they don't try. So they've done some not so nice experiments where they would take a dog and they would put the dog into a cage. And the cage was split into two parts. Okay? So, what's it called? Oops, let me do this properly. All right. So, split into two parts, but the two parts were separated only by a small fence. And that fence was easily jumped over by the dog. It would not be high enough for them not to jump over. So what they would do is they would electrify the bottom part. You can't see that. They would electrify the bottom floor of both sides of the cage. And so what the dog would do is the dog would continuously jump back and back and forth. Okay? Constantly jumping back and forth. But the problem was is that they would realize that they couldn't get out after a period of time. And once they'd realized that they could not get out after that period of time, they would simply lay down and whine and cry and do nothing because they had realized that they could do nothing and that they had learned that they were in a helpless situation. So you take the dog out and you put them into basically the same cage. But instead, you only electrify one side of the cage, and the other side of the cage is fine. You put the dog inside the electrified section, and what does the dog do? Nothing. The dog stays there because it has learned that in prior situations, it does not matter what they do. It doesn't matter if they jump over to the other side. That's not going to do anything. So they have learned that there's nothing for them to do other than to sit there and cry. And so the dog will stay on the electrified side and whimper. This is learned helplessness. You can see this in the horse right here. Okay, why the heck is the horse not galloping away and going and eating grass over here? Well, in previous sessions, in previous times, this horse has been tied to something that is much sturdier than this stupid chair. And so it knows that normally this is tied to a tree or to a fence post or something that isn't going to budge. And so when it gets tied to basically anything, it's like, oh, well, this is, they're not going to tie me to something that I can move, so I'm not going to be able to do anything. So apply it to your life. Where in your life have you failed at something, not done well at something, and just thrown in the towel? Oh, well, I'm not very good at math, so when I fail at math, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, there's no point in studying. There's no point in, like, trying really hard because I'm not going to do it. Oh, well, I'm not very good at making friends, and so, when I get into social situations, I'm not even going to try. Okay? That is learned helplessness. Cool. All right. Well, let's keep going. Okay, so Wolfgang Kohler had put together what is something that we already knew, but us psychologists, we got to just put names to things, and so that people think that we're really smart. But everyone already knows this idea. So insight learning is that light bulb moment, that aha, like I got it moment. Okay, it is when you are sitting down answering a quiz question and you're just looking at it, you're reading it over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden, bam, thing comes to you. The idea comes to you. That light bulb turns on. You're like, I know what it is. So basically, all you need to know about insight learning is Wolfgang Kohler's experiment. Basically, he used chimpanzees, as you can see in the photo here. Used chimpanzees, and what he did was he hung up some bananas high up in, out of reach of their jumping or anything like that. And so the monkeys would, or the chimpanzees, excuse me, the chimpanzees would see it, um, and they would, kind of run around, and they would, you know, jump at it and communicate and do all this stuff. Um, and what Wolfgang Kohler would most often see was not like this, trial and error type thing, but suddenly one of the chimpanzees would stop what they were doing and grab the boxes and move them over in the middle and stack them up so that they could climb up and get it. And so this was um, this is what insight learning looks like, and this is a specific um, study that you just need to remember. Wolfgang Kohler and the chimpanzees, the banana, and just kind of getting that moment of realization of like, oh, that's what it is. That's all you need to know. So latent learning was put together by a psychologist named Edward Tolman. So basically, the idea is that um, learning is not always immediately evident. So latent is, the meaning is hidden. So it's hidden learning. So think about it this way. When you guys begin to drive, now some of you might have, might already be doing so, but for those of you that don't, one of the great examples of latent learning is going to be your ability to drive around. So your house, here's your house or whatever, and in order to get to AHS, maybe I should have just wrote an S for school. I'm just going to write an S for school. That sounds like a much better idea. So, your house and school. And in order to get from your house to the school, you got to do all sorts of stuff. You got to go here, and then you got to take a left, and you got to take a right, do this, blah, 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 blah. You do a little swirly or whatever, and then you're at school. So right now, you're taking the bus or your parents are driving you there. You don't need to know how to get to school. That's your parents' job, or that's, um, Siri or whatever. So, but what is honestly happening is that you're actually doing a bit of learning. You know how to get to school, even though you don't really need to know how to get there. You don't need to know how to get to your friend's house because your parents drive you or they pick you up or whatever. But there is some learning there. There's some stuff that is being hidden away. And once you start to drive, you're not going to have to be like, oh, well, now I got to remember how to do this. There's already going to be a map of your surroundings in your brain, and you're going to be able to drive to a lot of different places that you haven't like actively tried to learn. Think about all the things that you aren't actively trying to learn how to do, but you are learning it because there's no real need at the moment. There's no real need for it. So that's latent learning. Basically, Edward Tolman did this study on rats. And so what he did is he had two groups of people, two groups of rats. He had rats A and B. So rat A's, the A rats were given food. Okay, so they were both supposed to solve a maze. Okay, just like this right here. So they were both supposed to solve a maze. This is getting out of control. So they're both supposed to solve a maze, and what group A was given, like I said, was given food at the end. They would have the cheese at the end of the maze, and group B was not given anything. They got no food. Okay, no food. And so the rats in group B started off slower because they had no real incentive to finish the maze other than to get out and go back to taking a nap. Okay, while group A finished it faster because they had a cheese to get or some food to eat at the end. Now, at the end of it, they did the test again. So they did this like multiple times, um, same maze or whatever that the mice would go through. And then finally, after the mice had learned it, they put a block of cheese or they put food into rat B's maze. And once that had happened, the rats in group B, the ones that had not gotten food before, actually solved the maze faster than the rats in group A, which is just showing you that, hey, there is learning going on, and even though it's hidden, even though it's not shown, there's still learning happening.